Our spiritual ascension to the fifth dimension is in full swing, and thus an expansion of consciousness is an absolute necessity. And this is only possible through a very profound inner process, which we want to talk about today. For those who walk this path have usually been prepared for it since childhood. They are, so to speak, the beacons of the new era. And yes, in this episode, I share an aspect with you that can give you a clue as to whether you have been chosen for a special task in this life. Yes, furthermore, we want to take a closer look at the deeper connections that are often completely neglected in the spiritual ascension process. Yes, the spiritual ascension process is often equated with some kind of insights or higher perceptions, but to get there in the first place, it really requires a very, very deep process within ourselves, and I would like to take you on this journey. Thus, we will approach the topic of the explanatory model to some extent, but also very clearly in a way that allows you to find out, okay, how is it actually with me? Am I likely? Am I possibly a no or someone who has been specially chosen for this path? And with that, your own story can also serve as a teacher for you. And that is super exciting because nothing that has happened in your life so far has been meaningless. Yes, no matter how cruel it has been. And when we understand how to see our own story as a teacher and truly grow from it, then we can also uncover the diamonds that lie within it. So I hope you're excited about this episode. Make sure to listen to it until the end. Then the whole picture will make sense. Yes, so first about me. My name is Linda Gysi. I have been a spiritual mentor for over 20 years, and I am also the author of the book Consciousness Next Level and the founder of the Potential Method. The Being Potential method is a truly unique method because it reveals your being potential. That is, your absolute strengths, which we have often been trained out of since childhood. And how we reactivate it, I would like to show you in our next upcoming Being Potential Method live show. It is free of charge, and with a bit of luck, we might even get to work together in this show. Therefore, when you sign up, just grab your problem and bring it along to the show. Because then we will look at the topic precisely based on your challenge. And I will show you how to not only solve your challenge, but also activate your being potentials. I hope you are as excited about it as I am. The link to the show for free registration can be found here in the text for this podcast. Okay, let's turn our attention to the topic of spiritual ascension. For those who delve very, very deeply into this process of spiritual ascension and expansion of consciousness, they can no longer put the genie back in the bottle. Most people come to the realization that many of the problems and challenges we face in life stem from deeply rooted emotional and self-sabotaging blockages. And these blockages, which are mostly shaped by early childhood experiences, significantly disrupt our ability to be in a loving connection with ourselves and others. They train away our being potentials, they twist us. And then at some point we become adults, and yes, we take on some role, but we are no longer truly ourselves. We all end up as walking blockades on two legs, and with spiritual ascension, the whole thing begins to crumble. Because it often starts with a very deep desire to heal the disturbed relationship with ourselves. Yes, and such an inexplicable certainty that something in one's own life cannot really be right, and that a very deep longing for peace, love, freedom, and also arriving in life is revealed, and these are often the drivers to break free from the mass hypnosis of superficialities and to want to delve deeper. When we do that, it quickly follows the realization that these emotional blockages and behavior patterns ultimately stem from past traumatic experiences, which somehow belong to our history, but not really to ourselves. And that is often the first contact with one's own self, with the higher self. Somehow it feels like something seems to be guiding you and constantly driving you to seek answers that you simply can't find in the official explanatory models. Your formative traumatic experiences may have arisen very subtly, or they may have been obvious or even cruel. Something is certain, they always leave an imprint on your soul. If, for example, your mother was emotionally distant or absent, or if you experienced too little loving attention, perhaps even rejection, shame, humiliation, violence, and similar things, then this could have left such deep wounds in your little child's soul. And you often experience this as a threatening feeling of separation and loneliness. And this can really manifest up to today in the form of insecurities, fears, lack of self-worth, but also a general lack in life, or give you the feeling of not being right or somehow being blocked. On your spiritual path, it is about recognizing these old wounds and understanding them not as weaknesses, but as invitations for transformation. And even if you are not to blame for the injury, you are still responsible for recognizing these injuries, naming them, and healing, repairing them. 2001. Yes, because only when we truly face the pains of our past, in a healing way, do we open ourselves to the possibility of a gigantic transformation and also higher spiritual insights. This requires courage, yes, and a willingness to meet ourselves with compassion and also patience. And thus, a very essential but often neglected component of spiritual ascension is the ability for self-regulation, and that means being able to keep our emotions, our feelings, but also our thoughts and our energies in such a balance, even when external circumstances or internal processes are challenging, really that we are able to hold the stress, the feelings, maybe even fears, and all that is so life-threatening in feelings within us. 2001. Self-regulation is a very, very important aspect of spiritual ascension. It does not belong solely in the psychological or therapeutic realm. It is a crucial component of spiritual ascension. Otherwise, it is incredibly difficult, even with the ascension symptoms and these heightened perceptions. We simply can't manage it any other way. We need to be able to keep the energies in balance. Yes, and childhood experiences of rejection or emotional neglect can significantly impair our ability to self-regulate. We simply haven't learned how to do it. And this later manifests in stressful situations, causing us to lose contact with our center. We then tend to either freak out or submit, adapt, want to please, develop depressive moods, or ultimately constantly distract ourselves with, work, social media, alcohol, or drugs. There are many things, and it is almost impossible to maintain healthy relationships if we are not able to regulate ourselves and heal the part that is not in order. And I believe that a really large part of our so-called modern world definitely suffers from this problem. Most of us are even totally unaware, simply because it is so normal, and we haven't learned it any other way. And I tell you, I myself had a problem with alcohol for many years. It's not that I was an alcoholic, but I just had the tendency to drink too much and especially regularly. And I knew that, so I made many efforts to somehow get it under control. It always failed. And it was only after I trained in self-regulation that I was able to stop consuming from one day to the next. You could simply stop. I didn't need it anymore. And by learning and thus applying it to myself, my problem disappeared on its own. And many participants in our Being Potential Method program report similar experiences. They mention that they suddenly stopped using the unhealthy habits from the early 2000s, which they used for regulatory compensation, as soon as they have learned with us how to regulate and hold their emotions. And it is so simple through conscious self-regulation as we simply regain control over our inner world. And this is a completely loving and sensitive, trauma-sensitive process, naturally with a lot of love and a bit of patience. But the reward is simply immense. A deep sense of inner peace, a clear mind, and the ability to, yes, live our own truth. I believe it is something very, very important that we stop bending ourselves, but rather that we are in such good contact with ourselves that we know our truth and can live it. Yes, regulating our inner states will also pave the way for higher mass levels of consciousness. I always say it like this, because when all the bullshit is cleared out of the channel, we become more receptive to the information that comes from our higher self. Before that, it simply can't work. It doesn't function. And even though it is clear to most of us, I would still like to emphasize that spiritual ascension does not mean leaving the world or drifting off into some spiritual spheres, nor does it mean turning away from or isolating ourselves from the people around us. On the contrary, it is about diving deeper into your life, healing the relationship with yourself, and forming an authentic connection with others. And every individual who embarks on this journey matters, because by healing our own wounds, we contribute to the healing of the collective and create a world based on love, compassion, and unity. The path of spiritual ascension is a journey to ourselves. We simply need to acknowledge that, and there, we encounter the darkness of our past, and then we can leave it behind and turn to our potentials and our soul. And yes, lead this life in peace and deep fulfillment. And even if the path may not always seem easy, I can say from my own experience that it is worth taking. Every single step we take brings us closer to what we truly are, namely a radiant being of light, capable of experiencing love in its purest form and also passing it on. That is why I also speak of being chosen. For those who had to descend deeply into separation through experienced suffering as children, contribute to a life in its full depth and beauty through their own transformation. When you meet such people, you see it in their eyes, you feel in their energy field. You hear it in their voice and in the wisdom with which they speak. And perhaps you are one of them too. Turn your painful story into a hero's journey. If you would like my support in this, then sign up for the next Being Potential show. I am really looking forward to seeing you. Maybe you would also like to follow me on Instagram. I wish you all the very best from the bottom of my heart. With love, your sister in spirit, your Linda.